right. Happy Friday, everybody. Today, as promised, we are going to start working on Earth's layers. Our Earth's layers will not be a foldable per se, but we will get it cut down and into our notebook. So you need your notebook for this activity. You need your Earth's layers printout. You will need your map pencils, you will need scissors, and you will need glue.
At this time, you are released to go to your next class period.
So at this time, I'd like you to go ahead and cut out the main portion here. You can leave all the words on the side and the blocks intact so that you come up with this. We are going to work on coloring this for starters, and then we will cut it down a little bit further. So if you need to pause the video to begin, you may do so at this out. Alright, so you should have this cut out, and we are going to start coloring. We are going to start coloring by shading in areas on the printout. We are going to start with the land that we see, or the continents. This is a repeat. I don't know if y'all remember, you did this or something similar. You learned about Earth's layers in 6th grade, because ultimately what we will be talking about is the Earth's changing surface, meaning mountain building, earthquakes, tsunamis, as well as volcanoes. So we want to know how all that forms, and in order for we need to know about plate tectonics, and we need to remind ourselves of Earth's interior. So this block that I've just colored green is basically the continents that are on Earth's surface. They would look green, or they are in our image. And if you look at this, this is like you cut the Earth, and that's what you're looking at, a cross section. So this would be our continent, and this over here is ocean. So I'm going to shade in the ocean blue. And remember, we don't have to do an excellent job of coloring. This is not an art assignment. This is science. We're trying to understand Earth's interior, Earth's layers, in order to comprehend how the Earth's plates can move. So just a little bit of repeat. So I'm going to go ahead and label these. This is continent. And this on the other side here are the oceans, or an ocean. All right. Now, beneath that, you can see that there is something beneath, as well as beneath the continent here. And this is what is known as a layer of the Earth.
6th graders, you should be in your class at this time.
That we call,
you are now released to go to the next class period.
The crust. So I'm just going to shade that in brown. Crust beneath the ocean is referred to as oceanic crust because it carries the ocean, and the crust beneath the continent is called continental crust because it carries continents. Now when we do cut, we'll slice this out. We're going to leave this directly beneath it white because the actual layer continues here, and we're going to shade it in as brown as well. This is the upper mantle. And the upper mantle combines with the crust to give us one layer beneath oceans and continents. And we've referred to the crust and the uppermost mantle, the lithosphere. That's why you see this little bracket here. We will be cutting that out in a minute to make and labeling them to make more sense of all of this. but we are now going to go ahead and move on into the middle mantle. This would be the middle mantle, and this too you have learned in 6th grade. I don't know if you remember it, but arrows are showing motion. They are showing motion of ooey gooey magma, where you have motion. So this rock is molten. Like y'all know, magma in Earth's interior is molten. Certain currents in here, we refer to these as convection currents, where warm stuff rises. And when it cools, because here it's warmer towards the Earth's interior, when it cools, it begins to sink again. So these are our convection currents in the mid-mantle. This is where that ooey gooey magma resides. And as you can see, it's in motion, so it is not solid here. It is definitely a semi-solid in this layer. So warm rises and cool material sinks. Convection current.
Fifth grade, you should be in your class at this time. 8th grade, you are now released to go to your next class period.
Now what we should shade this layer in, like I said, this, let's shade light red. Just to distinguish that it's a different layer from the upper mantle above it, or it's part of the mantle, but they're further divided into upper, middle, and lower mantle. Okay. So that directly beneath it is the lower mantle, and we can shade that in a darker red, I guess, since we chose red for that one. And this is the lower mantle. It is solid. And then once again, this is the section we're fixing to cut out. So beneath that would be what is known as the outer core. If y'all remember correctly, this is the outer core. Shaded in orange. Alright, remember at any time if you need to pause the video, please feel free to get caught up. All right, and then last but not least, we have Earth's most interior area, which is the inner core. And I'm shading my choice. All right, so we have our whole section of Earth's interior color-coded pretty much, and now we are going to begin to label some areas. Actually, no, let's go ahead and so let's cut the top off and get prepared to assemble, and then we'll label everything and describe it more accurately. I'm going to cut this white is not needed. It's going to be cut off totally. All the sections we left white, we can take out now.
At this time, all students should be in your classrooms.
Alright, once you have finished cutting out, we're going to get started with our assembling and labeling. I'm going to try and do these close to the edge of my notebook as close as possible because I have a bit of labeling to do on the other side. This doesn't fit quite right. Let's see. Kind of a funky fit here. But that's okay. We're going to make the best, do it as best as possible. So I'm going to start by gluing down. Well, let's put a title on our page. So let's go ahead and label it Earth. Interior layers. Alright, and I'm going to start by gluing down my uppermost portion here. Then we want to do the upper mantle, or the whole mantle actually, because this section right here represents the entire mantle. Upper, middle, lower. We'll try and get that up there, in there somehow. Actually, let's see the point of that. Alright. Go. And then we're going to do the outer core followed by the inner core. And last but not least, gluing down the inner core. Now we need to go ahead and you can either use the labels that were provided, cutting them out here from the side, and we will use those. I will use those, so if you need to pause, cut those out and follow along with me as I label each of those, that's fine. Go ahead and pause the video now. But now we're going to look at oceanic crust. Remember, the oceanic crust carries the oceans, and continental crust carries the continents. The interesting part about this very top layer here is actually the crust. So we're going to go ahead and, it's so tiny, the little labels, I'm getting glue everywhere. Okay, so here's the crust, that's the crust. But below it is the upper. So this dark represents the upper mantle. But these two layers, the crust and the upper mantle, combine to make a very interesting rock layer called the lithosphere. A crust and upper mantle. And we're going to draw us a bracket like there was before. And we're going to show that these two layers come together to make what is known as the lithosphere. Getting tight here on this sheet of paper. So we're fixing to write about each of these, so let's just keep going. So we know so far we have ocean crust or oceanic crust beneath the ocean carries the ocean, continental crust beneath continents carries the continents. The crust is this first layer. The second layer is known as the upper mantle, but the crust and the upper mantle combine to form a lithosphere or a rock layer. This basically makes up those plates that make up Earth's cracked surface. So the next layer we have here is the mid-mantle with those convection currents. The convection currents are actually, like we said, ooey gooey molten rock. Let me put the label convection currents in here real quick. Alright, so here are those convection currents. And because this layer is very different in that it has molten rock or ooey gooey of it that is in motion, we have another special name for this layer. It's called the asthenosphere, which literally means without strength because it's molten rock. So this is the asthenosphere. It's a special layer with ooey gooey molten rock. All right, we're going to continue. This is our lower mantle. Alright, this is the lower mantle. And then, of course, we come to the outer core. The outer core looks larger than the mantle, but the mantle is actually the largest of Earth's interior layers. So just so you know, it's deceiving a little bit here. But this is the outer core. And this is the inner core. Alright, so if you're not caught up with me, go ahead and pause it so you can see where we are at this time and what your diagram of Earth's interior layers should look like. And then when you're ready, you may go ahead and click play again. We are going to start by describing each of the layers a little bit more in depth. I'm going to use the left side, which I don't normally do, but since we want this kind of all together, we're going to use our left side to do this. So let me get prepared, and I'm moving to the left side. And now I'm going to describe earth interior layers. So we want to be able to understand them better and describe them, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Let me see here if I can get this better. So for starters, we are going to start with the crust. You can, I guess you can use these little boxes. I guess we could start with those. Wouldn't hurt anything. And then we can describe further as needed. So obviously there are four. This is layer one, number one, crust. And I guess I'll just do that. All right, so composition, what it is made of? It is made of silicone, Si, chemical symbol, oxygen, iron, Fe for iron, and nickel. That is what it is made of. So that's where you can get these elements. It has a thickness of about 32 kilometers, not very thick, and its state of matter is solid. So the crust, first of all, beneath the ocean is equal to oceanic crust. And beneath the continent, it's called continental crust. Okay? So the crust carries the oceans and the continents, or the oceans and the land. The mantle is made up of three distinct layers or distinct parts. So it has three distinct parts, the mantle. The upper mantle, the middle mantle or mid-mantle, and the lower mantle. The composition of the mantle is pretty much very similar to that of our crust. It too contains silicone, oxygen, iron, and nickel. It is the thickest layer, with a thickness of about 2,900 kilometers. And the state of matter is mostly solid except for in the mid-mantle. So we're going to write solid / non-solid. And it's not liquidy, so we're going to talk about that, why I just put non-solid instead of liquid. So let's talk a little bit more about the upper mantle very quickly. So the upper mantle. And the crust. combine to form a rock layer called the lithosphere. Lithos means rock, sphere means round, ball-like. So the upper mantle and the crust combine to form a rock layer called the lithosphere. Earth's tectonic plates, the cracked crust, when we talk about cracked crust, we're talking about the lithosphere. So it's important in what we're learning. You will hear the word lithosphere, not crust, from me. Then the mid-mantle is also very, very important. So this is a rock layer. Obviously, if it's a rock layer, this one is solid, right? Now, the mid-mantle, on the other hand, it's made of ooey gooey molten rock or magma. So made of ooey gooey molten rock or magma. This is those convection currents. This layer is semi-solid, so it's not solid, but it's not liquidy either because it's molten rock. So it's a semi-solid. And it's here where we see convection current. So with moving magma due to convection currents. And once again, convection currents just means that whatever gets heated up towards the Earth's more interior, the hot rises, hot materials rise, and cooler material, or cooler magma, will sink. So there is motion in there, in this layer. And then last but not least, we have the lower mantle. The lower mantle is not particularly significant. So the lower mantle is a solid. Okay? So what's happening is the upper mantle and the crust combine to make that big chunk of rock that carries oceans and continents called the lithosphere. And in the middle mantle, we have those ooey gooey molten magma. It has convection currents in it, that's moving magma. And this layer we refer to with the moving magma as the asthenosphere. So you will hear me say that word quite a bit because that's where the motion is, and that's what's going to be moving our lithospheric plates along like a conveyor belt, like one at the grocery store that moves your groceries along to the cashier. All right, now we are on layer number 3. We bump this up a little bit. There we go. So layer number 3 is our outer core. The outer core is mainly made up of iron and nickel. So let me get our little square in here, move it down. The outer core mainly composed of iron and nickel, so Fe and Ni. And the thickness, remember I said in the diagram it looks thicker, but the mantle is the thickest layer. The thickness here is only about 2,250 kilometers deep. And the state of matter is solid. What is important about the outer core is that it's, oh no, it's not, it's liquid, it's molten. Sorry guys, let me make, Nene made a boo-boo. Let me fix it, hang on. No, it isn't. I'm like, it's got motion in it. It's molten metal, right? Iron and nickel, molten metal. And it is a liquid state of matter. There we go, liquid. And what's really interesting about this layer is that it actually, because there's metals in that inside this layer moving in motion, metals, this gives us our magnetic field. So this gives Earth its magnetic field. So this magnetic field surrounds us, and it actually protects us from a lot of magnetism from the sun. So it's very, very good to have that we have this magnetic field due to our outer core. Now remember, it's pretty hot down here because as you move from, of course, the surface to Earth's interior, it gets hotter and hotter. This heat is when the Earth came together and formed, when our solar system formed about 4.5 billion. So this heat has been trapped in there because it cannot escape. So this layer is molten metal because of the heat component. Now, if you think about it, then it actually should mean, you think about, well, if that's due to the heat, then the inner core, which is really, really deep, and it too is only made up of iron and nickel, it should be molten too, but not correct. So let's write down inner core. The inner core, and let's cut out a little square here. The inner core, once again, same composition as the outer core. It is made up of iron and nickel, so Fe for and I for nickel. Its thickness is approximately 1,300 kilometers deep. And the state of matter here is once again solid. And you'd think the inner core is the hottest layer, so you'd think, well, shouldn't it be molten? Well, it would be, but there's so much pressure from all the other layers above it that it basically solidifies that metal and pressurizes it into a solid. It's about 6,000 degrees Celsius at Earth's interior, the inner core. So let me just check and make sure that I have communicated everything we needed to know. And I'm pretty sure I did. I just wanted to double check. So now you have information. You have a descriptor of each of Earth's layers as well as our diagram. And these go hand in hand, obviously, because you will be using these to do your next assignment. All right, guys, that's it for Earth's interior. Earth's interior, remember to reference both pages and have them side by side so you can look at this and get the information as needed. And that's the assignment. Y'all have a wonderful weekend and happy Friday.